Hello, hi, finally. Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you as well. It's an honor to be interviewing you. I never thought I'd get the chance, so this is a real pleasure on my end. I was working previously as a teacher librarian. I've read lots of your books to my students, and they've always loved them and then asked me for more, which is beautiful, just what you want to hear. So
Yes.
today I'm asking you these questions for the Shadow Judges for the CBCA Book Awards, which is very exciting. So congratulations for being shortlisted.
Thank you.
So the first question that I have for you is, what inspired you to write this book?
Three things. First of all, I always wanted to write what used to be called an old-fashioned romantic adventure. And by romance, they didn't mean people falling in love. They meant just wonderful, way out, extraordinary characters and maybe a prince in disguise. So that was the first reason. The second reason was because we have acknowledged massacres and horrendous things against the Indigenous people of this nation, but we haven't acknowledged, apart from lambing flat, quite how horrendous the massacres were and how hard things were for Chinese Australians, that they had been enormously valued members of the community and friends before the gold rush. And then things changed because unfortunately, a lot of the men who were attracted here by the gold rush were not very nice people. But the third one was basically just the love of an old man I knew when I was a kid. He was in his 90s. He had been born around about the middle of, well, probably around about 1860. He and his brothers, they were Chinese and very poor, had been dropped by boat secretly on a beach in North Queensland. And those two young men walked to Charters Towers to dig for gold. It's a long way to Charters Towers. They made enough gold to keep on going and no longer be diggers. It wasn't a very safe occupation. And so they walked again from Charters Towers down to Brisbane. But they knew they would never make enough money for their children to get a good education, to have everything they needed and to be happy. So they made a bargain. One of them would marry and have children, and the other one would never marry. And everything he made would go towards educating and supporting the people who became his nieces and
Oh,
nephews. He
wow.
lived next door to us, and I loved him deeply. He loved kids. Walking home, he'd be actually up there at the front gate, and we always hoped he'd be there going, and look, we'd go in, and it would be a Chinese festival of some sort. Now, look, I didn't know anything about China then, or the festivals. Now I can identify the things like mooncakes and why we were letting off fireworks when it wasn't firework night, and all of the other things that we did. He grew almost everything
Wow.
on his suburban block, which was all that was left of his market garden. Um, I mean, we grew a mulberry tree, a sand pit, and a dog. He grew sugarcane, he grew tobacco, he grew everything. He grew an assortment of wonderful vegetables that he kept on giving to my mum. But back then, my mum only really knew about cabbage. So after he'd gone, she'd very carefully wrap all these delicious, gorgeous vegetables in newspaper and put them in the bin. Now as an adult, I know what they are, and nobody would have been, oh, better food if she'd cooked
Yeah,
those veggies.
of course.
Um, he was wonderful. I never saw him without a smile. He was possibly the kindest, most generous, extraordinary man I have ever met. So yes, this is a book for Mr. Do to explain a little about the context of that extraordinary journey he made from the top of Australia down to Brisbane, and then the journey of his life, everything moved for his nieces and nephews, and all of them had wonderful educations, and all of them loved him very, very deeply too.
Well, that's beautiful. What a sacrifice to make for them.
Look, it was to say, I will live my whole life just for my nieces and nephews.
Yeah, obviously brought him joy, but at the same time, not having your own family probably would have been hard for him. But wow, that's amazing that it's come from your own experience.
Look, I don't know. He spoke almost no English. I don't think he spoke Mandarin, but whatever language he spoke, I didn't. But as I said, I never saw him without a smile, and he was a man of incredible joy. I think being able to make that sacrifice, I think seeing his nieces and nephews flourish gave him joy. I think the ability to share the things he thought were important, because he taught me a lot about gardening and irrigating and all sorts of other things too.
I found that fascinating in the book too, reading about that, what Tig was learning and the vegetables that they ate. Because I've obviously, know about some history, but I guess reading it in that point of view as you're traveling along in the story, I picked up lots of information, as well as I'm sure lots of the Shadow Judges did, and lots of other students around Australia. So yeah, it was interesting to learn all of that. But I was shocked about the conditions, I have to admit, how many died. I was really shocked. The long walk.
That's that one incident, because so much wasn't recorded because there were no witnesses. But that one where we do have records, where more than 2,000 Chinese men came ashore north of Sydney, and only that tiny handful ever made it to the protectorate, the area kept to keep them safe in Victoria. Possibly some of them got jobs along the way. The Chinese people were very, very valued as cooks and, of course, as gardeners. But no, I think we have to assume that extremely bad things happened to them on the way from Sydney
With the
down to.
starvation, that was the hardest thing for me, that they were kept walking and they didn't have enough food, and Tig wanted to share her food and wasn't allowed to. And I found that really sad, knowing that they weren't eating as they were doing such a tough journey, but they kept going as well until the end. They didn't give up. That was
And that
inspiring.
too, that is Mr. Do's story. Well, when you think even now of what that walk would involve, and back then there weren't even roads to most of the areas those two men took themselves. So I can't write Mr. Do's journey, but Mr. Do's journey, and the incredible love he had for kids, but also just his joy, his absolute joy in being able to do it.
And the next question that we have for you is, what were the most fun and challenging parts of writing this book? Did you know exactly how you wanted to write the book and what was going to happen, or did you change it as you went along?
Of course, I changed it as I went along, but I always knew how it was going to end. I always write the ending first, because it is a lot easier to start out on the journey if you know where you are heading. So I always knew where I was heading. And I was always heading for that wonderful romantic ride, leaping on a horse and galloping to the rescue. So
It's beautiful.
yes, it began with a gallop and it ends with a gallop. And I knew that is exactly the kind of book I wanted to write.
And I love the beginning. I think, didn't realize Tig was a girl. And so that was obviously intentional. Did you want to confuse your reader, or did you want them to have the surprise?
Yes. We just assumed bushrangers were male. So I wanted them to have the surprise. Interestingly, the hardest bit to write about that was the blurb. Very, very hard to write a blurb without saying she, he, him,
That's true.
her, etc. So we had real trouble was writing a word that didn't sound peculiar and just inserting Tigg wherever we might put a pronoun. The word was hard.
You did the job
no,
though, because I had no idea. I mean, yeah, it was
no,
interesting.
Look, it was so much fun to do that. And also, look, apologies to all boys. Boys sometimes won't pick up a book because it's got a girl on the front or a female heroine. Please trust me, there are books you'll absolutely adore who happen to have females as the male characters. So yes, it was just a little bit of trickery. Hopefully you were dragged into the book before you realized you were reading about a girl, not a boy.
Well, she's a tomboy anyway, really. So I don't think she's not overly feminine. She can, I think, associate with boys and with girls because you admire her spirit and her courage and how she herself pushes on despite the unknown. So I just found that little twist was interesting because normally I can pick up on that, but I didn't this time. And I'm sure a lot of your shadow judges would have been surprised as well.
The other one I wanted to do with Tig, though, too, is yes, she was a tomboy. She loves galloping to the rescue. She really enjoys the adventure of holding up coaches. But she also enjoys wearing an absolutely gorgeous dress.
She did,
She
that's
loves
right.
clothes. So you don't have to be one or the other. You can be both. And Tig was both. I think one of the tests of a good book is if you can imagine what's going to happen to the main character or the main characters in the next 10 or 20 or 30 years. I think Tig is going to continue to ride around occasionally in trousers and really not care what anyone thinks. But I think she is also going to dress absolutely beautifully and go for balls. And people will say how absolutely stunning she is as she waltzes around the room with jewels and a coronet. She will have it all.
I think you just like when she found, was it silk? When was it the green color? Yes, and she was just found that stunning. You did discover that about her as it went along, and then when she was playing with her hair and changing the color and emerging it as a young woman as well, and she enjoyed both parts. So I did find that interesting as well. So the next question I have for you is, was there a certain message you wanted the people who read the book to understand, or did you write the book out of enjoyment?
Both. I wanted to write a book that I just thoroughly enjoyed writing. I had written a very hard book about grim things before, and I wanted a book that was fun to write with lots of adventure. So the answer to that is very definitely both.
I did pick up like it was a lot of fun. I think I could see that in your writing. Like
Oh,
you seemed joyful as I was reading it, just write the characters and yeah, it was beautiful to read. So that definitely came out.
there are 1,000 messages in it. Be kind to your friends, stand by your friends, etc., etc. Never take people at face value. Be kind, be empathetic. Always remember that there is a lot about the past that has been hidden, and never stop looking as well.
Yeah, that's but not follow the crowd because I remember the scene with the fire. And I thought sometimes it's tempting just to say someone else is doing or hearing news and assuming it's correct and or reading the newspaper and saying, yep, that's what's happened, but you don't really know. And you have to dig deeper and
No,
find out for yourself.
yes, and look again, these days it is so much easier. I was part of a workshop on Trove given by the National Library a couple of weeks ago. And quite by coincidence, I looked up something, which led me to something else, which led me to something else, which led me to something absolutely extraordinary about 2 years of Australian history that has never been mentioned and was obviously hidden deliberately for about 50 years. And I do not know whether I should talk about it or not. And I thought I knew it. I spent most of my life digging in weird places, trying to find all of the history that they didn't give us, or all of the myths that we were given to believe that weren't true. And here is this absolutely stunningly large one. So for all of you who actually want to find treasure these days, no, there aren't any gold coaches to hold up, but there is a heck of a lot of treasure to find once you go digging.
That's interesting, because you would think by now it would have all been discovered, with historians and writers.
Yep.
But I guess it's the sources of information that you come across, and something can change, events of what happened in the past, depending on what has been brought to light, and if it was intentionally hidden, which is sad, really.
It is, it's something that happened in wartime in Australia. I can see why it was hidden then. It needed to be hidden. It was obviously top secret for at least 50 years. I've no idea. I don't think, however, the information has ever been released. I discovered it simply on Trove. I read all the nice official ones, but Trove has a lovely thing. You look up something and you get the main, and if you keep going down, you start getting something like the Whoop Whoop Ladies Crochet Gazette. And that was where I started to find references to it. And they came from all over Australia, all kinds of different people, writing letters to the editor because they thought the truth needed to be told. There is a thing in Australia called a D notice. It means that the government can say you are not allowed to talk about this, but they don't think about censoring something like the Whoop Whoop Ladies Crochet Guild.
Yes.
And thanks to Trove, that's where you can think, oh, whoops, is this true? And then go hunting and see, can this be substantiated? And it could, because the people who experienced it came from all over Australia. There was an American journalist who wrote about it in America, but it was never published in Australia. But again, as I said, I'm not saying what it was, and I don't know if I will ever say what it was. Possibly it's been kept secret for good reason. I don't know. Ask me in 6 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years, and I'll have an answer.
That's fascinating.
Yes, keep digging for that treasure. Look, whether you're going to be a scientist, whether you're going to be a chemist, whether you're going to be a plumber, whether you're going to be an architect or a writer or a historian or anything, keep digging into your profession, because the more you research, the more extraordinary things you're going to find.
Well, that's wonderful advice for all of us. The next question that I have is, did you base Tigg's story on anyone else's? And you kind of have touched on this. Or did you make it up based on things you knew?
Just about every character in the book is based on someone, including Prince Rudolph. A close friend of mine would have been a prince of the Austro-Hungarian Empire if it still existed. He spent World War II as a child, locked in the family castle because supporters of the Habsburgs were anti-Nazi. He had only one book, was called, I won't say it in German, Christoph in Australia. And he said he read that book over and over and over for the entire war until they were released. And he said, of course, after being kept, oh, okay, it was a castle with large grounds. They were, and they were starving because Germany was starving, but it was still a pretty good life by most standards for the war. He wanted adventure, and so he came to Australia, only with a small backpack and a trombone. I stayed with his mother and sister in Austria, and I thought, look, it wouldn't mean anything now. The Austro-Hungarian Empire vanished with World War I, and there was everyone actually bowing and curtsying to us, and it was incredibly important. And a dinner with various members of royalty from around Europe. I have to say, we'd been hitchhiking and also traveled on a bus. And before we called in on the Princess Elizabeth, and she asked us to stay, we'd sent all our clothes to an Austrian laundry where they shrank.
Oh.
So there I was at a dinner party with absolutely beautifully gowned and dressed people in a jumper which was now 2 sizes too small, and jeans which were halfway up my ankle, and also a broken collarbone. But look, they just accepted that. Look, we were young and having adventures, and it was fine. So yes, Prince Rudolph is very, very much based on someone, and with enormous love. Mara in the book is based on someone with not quite as much love. All of the characters are based on someone. All of the places in the book are based on real places.
So with Ma, is that something that you had read about as part of your research, or is it someone that you knew of?
No, the baby farmer was something I discovered, look, I can't remember how many decades ago. If you read Dickens, if you read any of the newspapers of the period, or for that matter, going back hundreds of years, baby farming was actually big business, and particularly for a woman who was a widow or didn't want to get married, it was a very, very viable thing to do. Children who had been born out of wedlock needed to be hidden, but also hopefully looked after. And so, look, there were some absolutely wonderful baby farmers who took these kids in, absolutely adored them, and were their family for the rest of their lives. There were other cases where the children usually died, but the parents still kept on sending the fees. But no, that I got from newspapers from about 1830 onwards.
It's interesting because it's in some ways it is a long time ago, but in other ways it doesn't feel like that. You know, when you look at the time period, you think things have changed so much. And you know, it's
Yeah, look, for me, meeting Mr. Du, a Chinese gold miner from the 1800s.
yeah.
Okay, very, very, very young. He was very, very, very old, but I met him. I had the privilege to actually live with 2 extraordinary women for a while who went through the Boxer Rebellion in China, where as the army marched through their property, they had been hidden inside a wall. Their servants made them stand in a wall and then just plastered over it, paper and then plaster. And they had to stand there and not make a noise, not eat, not drink, not do anything, these little kids. And sitting there on a veranda, eating absolutely delicious scones and cup after tea, just listening to this story after story after story. I am lucky enough to have lived in places where people have told me the most fascinating, wonderful stories. And they are also the basis of the book, but also too, I grew up in a family of storytellers. When bored, my favorite thing would be to ask my mother or grandma, tell me a story about when you were a little girl. And grandma's grandma had done that, and grandma's grandmas had done that. So just in the stories I got from grandma and my mother, we were going back 6 or 8 generations
Wow.
women. And so, yes, I grew up with stories, and also because of that, I knew the history I was being given at the time at school was not correct. The teacher, however, didn't appreciate my putting my hand up and saying, sorry, miss, that's wrong. My great something grandmother was one of Australia's first free settlers, and she kept a diary. And in that diary, we have got first-hand accounts of a lot of things that happened. And that was not the same as in the history books. And that was a lesson I learned by the time I was 3 or 4. Look for the voices of the time. But remember too, people in the past could lie, just like they can today. but they're unlikely to lie in a diary. She wrote that for herself. In her will, she asked for it to be left to her oldest daughter, and then her oldest daughter, etc., etc., passed down through the generations, which is how I've got it now. I'm the oldest daughter, oldest daughter of the oldest daughter of the oldest daughter of the oldest daughter. And it's treasured, though I think I've been saying this for years and I haven't done it. I think it is time. It is bequeathed on permanent loan to an institution, even though I have safe in acid-free paper, etc., etc. I think it probably needs far safer archiving than I can give it.
It shows the importance of storytelling, passing those stories down even with grandparents, and there's children who are looking to write, starting with those stories and asking questions. So that's really interesting. If it wasn't for that diary, you wouldn't have known all of that or be questioning things. So yeah, it's very important, isn't it?
Ask
Yeah.
next time you're in a car with your parents, turn off the radio, turn off the video, and say, how did you or mum or whoever it is meet? What did grandma do when she was a little girl? Where did grandpa come from, etc., etc. Ask for those family stories, because if you ask, you probably won't hear them. But I promise, once you ask, you are going to find very interesting things you never knew about your family.
Yeah. The next question is, I love the twist at the end with Mr. Rudolph. It was very unexpected. Do you find twists like that challenging to write?
No, because I write them first.
I
I know what's going to happen. So I don't get to the last chapter and think, oh, how can I find a twist to end this? I always write the ending of the book first. Look, I almost always change the ending too, because of course, once I write the book, I know the characters better, I've thought about it more, etc. So there are very few endings that stay like that. Often they are completely different. But having that ending written first really helps. And that's something I would advise every early career writer. And to all the shadow judges, if you are writing, you are a writer. You are not a professional writer yet. You are an emerging career author, and do not forget it. If you are writing, and you're writing not just for your own pleasure, but learning to write for other people, you are a writer now, just not published yet.
Yeah, that's true. And, whether you choose to publish it or not, all of that writing is important, and sharing it with each other is important as well, and encouraging each other to continue writing. I think that's great advice. And the
Yes,
next
I was just going to add another one. Look, yesterday I had a problem. I had to make a decision, and I just didn't know. So I started to write a poem about it. And by the end of the poem, putting it in a format that I'm used to, which is writing, I got my answer. Writing will give you far more than you expect. If you want to be a physicist, imagining it. Look, imagine we have imagination muscles, and in fact, it is almost like that in our brain. The more you imagine, the stronger your imagination muscles will be. If you want to think up an entirely new view of the universe that no one has thought of, you need imagination. Einstein always said that, look, he wasn't very good at maths. He wasn't very good at school. He didn't actually think he was all that bright. Wow, he could imagine, and he did.
I think it's important because I've heard, teaching, I've had students say, oh, I can't do this, miss. And it's like, it's difficult for lots of people, but it's just giving yourself the time as well to come up with the imagining and to put it down and starting from somewhere and just keeping at it. Do you find it hard, even you, how many books that you've written? Do you sometimes find it challenging?
For the first 3 days, I'm sure it's not working. I will never write again. My husband has finally made me put up a sign in my office saying, Do not panic. It will work at the end of the third day. And so, yes, every book I write, it does not work. I think it's not working. It's not working. I will never write again. And then suddenly on the third day, it's as though I'm not writing at all. I'm there and I'm just putting down what is happening. But it's very difficult often to spend the time to write when you think that time might be wasted. Or through my childhood, I was told, oh, don't waste time writing. No one can make a living being a writer in Australia. So I wrote in pencil in a notebook under my bed so no one knew where I was when I was writing. And that's why I say, look, if you are writing for others now, if you want to be a writer, then you don't want that without having the talent. You are an early career writer. You are not wasting your time writing. But writing also helps you clarify your ideas. Writing helps you think what might be. Writing forces you to think, how would this kind of person think? How would this person? It teaches you empathy to understand yourself and to understand other people. Even if you only ever show what you've written to your dog, write. And by the way, writing is a better form of daydreaming. Daydreaming and imagining works, but the very act of writing it down does change our brains. It does improve the way we think. Even if, like me, look, I'm dyslexic. I always
you really? Wow. Because that's another thing
look,
that pops up all the time, with children who are dyslexic, and they can say, oh, no, I'm not going to try. And wow.
that's the plot for my next book. And it's written on the back of a bill, which I hope I paid. And I don't think I can read a single word on that, but it doesn't matter. I've written it down, so I'm going to remember it.
Yes.
It's there. So look, even for me, where I know I will never be able to read my notes unless I type them, if I get an idea, as I did when I was waiting on one of those, our call is important to you and will be answered by the next available operator in 6 or 7 hours. I jotted down the plot of a book, and here it is.
Wow, that's amazing. And so with your process, so you've written the ending or, sort of sketched it out. Do you then start at the beginning, or do you jump around? Do you go to the middle? Do you start on a character? What is your typical process, or is there a typical process?
Look, write whatever is vivid. We are incredibly lucky to live in the age of word processors. Back when I started typing, you had to type it out. If you made a mistake, wanted to change it, you had to throw out just about the entire book and do it again and again and again and again. These days, we've got the luxury to write whatever scenes we want. I never set out to write a book. That would be terrifying. Instead, every morning, I think of the scene I am going to write today, and I write it. And it may be the beginning, it may be, I'm not quite sure where in the book this is going to go, but it needs to be there. It's an important scene, and I can see it, and I really want to write about it. So I write it. And look, quite possibly once I've written that, I'll write another and another and another. At some stage, I'll feel ready to actually start the book at the beginning. Sometimes the beginning is incredibly clear and I know exactly what I want to write. And so I do write the ending, but then I start at the beginning. It just simply depends on the book. But for you, write what is vivid and what you want to write about. And look, remember, you can write about what you feel passionate about. If you're passionate about pizza, write about pizza. Look, cookbooks really, really sell, and cookbooks which are written with character and humor, and so you can really see the author behind the cooking. They sell brilliantly. Books about sports sell brilliantly. it doesn't have to be fiction. It doesn't have to be the kind of books I read. But it's also important for all of you at school to realize, yes, you are going to find a lot of the books you are given to study boring. This is not by your teacher, principal, and the person who created the syllabus to torture you. It's a way so that you can see all of the different kinds of writing that exist. And no, look, of course, you're not going to enjoy all of them. Most books are really, really mostly boring to people. Last time I went into a bookshop, and it was a wonderful one, I bought 2 books, and they're about 2,000. Now, admittedly, I had read some of them, but all of the rest I would find boring. I don't want to read about cricketers. I don't want to read about politicians unless they've been dead for at least 20 years. I don't want to read the kind of book where one hero kills 40,000 innocent bystanders to get the villain and everyone says, hey, hey, you're wonderful, etc., etc. I don't want to read books about friends, in inverted commas, being nasty to each other. They're probably 99.9% of the books that have been written I don't want to read. I would find them boring. And that is one of the hardest things of all. It's to find the books you love. And even at my age, the joy of a friend saying, oh, I've discovered a new author, and looking up and realizing, oh, they've written 10 books. It's wonderful. I've got my next 10 books, and being able to read it. Don't worry if a book bores you. Of course it's going to bore you. But when you study it at school, you will be subconsciously absorbing all of the techniques that writer used. Yes, you can learn a lot about creative writing. You certainly need the practice, but most of the tools and techniques you need, you will just absorb like a sponge soaking up something you've spilt on the bench. You won't know you're learning them. Just simply by reading, you will be learning the many, many techniques to write a magnificent book in whatever genre you feel passionate about.
No, that's wonderful advice. I used to see that as well with the students, and I would say to them, you really need to find something you enjoy and just don't give up. Keep looking and finding, just test a few pages until you find, and then it's like a light bulb switches on and then they're on their way. And you don't, just because one of your friends likes something, you're not necessarily going to like it. It's great to share those recommendations with each other, but it's such a personal thing, isn't it, reading, and you have to find what you like.
Yes, and it's also, I always like to teach kids how to taste a book. Now, by tasting a book, I don't mean doing this.
Some will in kindy, I have to say. I'm like, yeah.
No, okay, it doesn't taste good. It's not good for the book. Tasting a book means the clues you can tell whether you'll go it. Look at the cover. Publishers spend a lot of money and time on the cover. Read the blurb.
Yes.
3 of us spend almost as much time writing that blurb as I spend writing the book. It will tell you a lot about the book. Read a bit here and a bit here, or read the beginning. Or if you're like me, I don't like books with unhappy endings. I think it's cheating. It is very easy to make the reader cry by killing off beloved characters. And then people think, oh, I'm so sad. This book must be absolutely brilliant. It's affecting me so much. No, it's not. It is so much harder to make people have tears of laughter or just transcendence because they've escaped into this wonderful, adventurous world. So I cheat. Every book I read the ending first. And if that's an unhappy ending, I am not going to read the beginning. And also remember, books aren't like broccoli. You don't have to eat it all. Once you hold a book, unless it's one you have to study at school, you are the boss of the book. The book is not a crocodile. It will not snap your hand off if you shut it. Look, I probably don't finish 1 in 4 books that I start. It's like eating the world's most delicious pizza. You have one slice, and you have another slice, and it's wonderful, and another slice, and another slice, and another slice, and you're halfway through, and you think, oh, that was wonderful, but I've had enough. And that is a perfectly valid way to read a book too, to absolutely adore it. But think, yeah, I loved it, I adored it, I've had enough. Okay, how does it end? And go to the ending. You are the boss of the book.
That's great advice. There's always another book. There's so many to choose from, and I agree with you. It did take me a while. At one point, I'm like, I have to finish, but I'm at the point now that there's just so many that I'm the same. I will, if I get to a point. But that's a good tip. Go to the ending. I thought that was cheating, but I'm going to do that from now on. I'll read the ending and say that's it.
There is no such thing as cheating. This
Yes,
is fiction.
I know. I know.
But you're allowed to do it. It's also really hard because so many of us know how much kids will get from being readers.
I know.
Reading literally does make you more intelligent. It creates new neurons in your brain. It makes you process information faster. It does so much that's good for you.
It
And we
does.
forgot to say that not one of us reads a book because it's good for us. We just read because it's fun. It's
It's enjoyable.
escapism.
It
We're
is.
fascinated.
Yeah,
That's why we
definitely.
read.
Exactly. The next question, what part of editing is your favorite thing?
I think probably when it comes back from my wonderful editor, Lisa Berryman. And I will have a niggling feeling that there's something wrong here and I can't find it. And Lisa or the absolutely wonderful Kate will read it and they will pick it out. And there is this flash. As soon as they say it, I realize, yes, of course, that was it. That was it. I changed this bit of the plot. I changed this background. I changed this character. And suddenly the whole book is rebalanced. So yes, I think the best bit, it's even better than Santa Claus. In fact, a good editor is Santa Claus. They come with a great big bag of all of the mistakes you've made in the book. And you get the chance to make it so much better.
Is it because you think you get so wrapped up in all the details that it needs fresh eyes, or is it because, I don't know, you're too involved in the process and you're unwilling to take bits out, or is it all both of those things?
Okay, it's all of those things. And there is also a point where you've revised it and you've read it so often that you think no one is going to find this exciting. It is really, really, really boring. But that's only because I've read it 56 times.
So you need the fresh eyes looking at it again. Yeah,
You
that's
do need,
yeah.
but even with the fresh eyes, there is one book, which I won't mention, where I spelled the main character's name in two different ways. As I said, I'm dyslexic. It was read by one editor. It was read by another editor. It was read by yet another editor. It was read by a proofreader. I read it again. Both editors read it again after all the changes had been made. So this is a book which had been read over and over and over and over and over. And still when it was printed, the heroine's name was spelled in two different ways. And we didn't know until a reader emailed me.
That's interesting,
You
isn't it?
you hunt, you may find the first edition of that book where the name is spelled in two different ways. To some extent, though, that is a compliment to the story. You get so carried away by what's happening, you don't look at the spelling of the main character's name.
Interesting. The next question, my favorite character is Tigg. I like how she gains confidence and learns new things throughout the story. Do you have a favorite character, and if so, why?
Tigg. And that is why I made her the heroine. I really, really, really love Tigg. And also to some extent too. No, look, I don't envy her, but writing about Tigg, having all of those adventures, and look, as I write to you now, I've actually got several broken ribs, etc. I am never going to gallop down the road to stop a gold coach or anything like that again. But writing about Tigg doing it, yes, for a while I was there. I was doing it.
It was
And
very
that
vivid. I say as a reader, I felt like I was there with them. And so that was really special when you're transported somewhere. It doesn't always happen when, as vividly as when I was reading a book, but I could really see Tig in those situations. And I was afraid for her, when she was being shot at, or and you feel those feelings with them. You're nervous, you're hoping she'll find, her way, and where is she going to end up? All throughout the story, I was really hoping, is she going to be okay? But that's the wonderful part of reading. You don't know.
I felt that too, even though I knew what the ending was. I was still scared for her. I was in tears a couple of times. I was sort of saying, yes, yes, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And I was also having the most wonderful fun as she was doing it. That too is the joy of writing. When you first learn to write, look, it's hard. You have to think, but the more practice you get, you're no longer really aware of the writing. You are there, and you are just writing what is happening as clearly as you can with all of the techniques and experiences you've got, but you're not consciously using them. You know them so well, you just write, and you are there in that book.
Oh, that's interesting, because that's how it feels, as the reading, just seeing it. And I love the landscape as well, showing out the beautiful Australia and how harsh it can be, but also how beautiful. And that helped to picture, set the background for the story as well, because that's contributing to the story. So that was beautiful as well. So the next question I have, and it's the last one. Do you have any advice for anyone trying to write a story? I know you've given lots of advice so far, but is there anything else that you can add to someone who may want to be a writer one day, or someone who just enjoys journaling or writing? Anything else that you can share?
Don't ever try to write a story. Just write it.
It's interesting, because I wouldn't have thought that at all. I would think that, as a teacher, I think you would have to have your little plan and you start writing, especially someone like you who's written so many amazing books. Yeah,
Look, I plan my books for about 3 years, but
right.
unfortunately, a student can't say to their parents and teacher,
No,
sorry, I'm taking 3 years of school to finish my novel.
yeah.
So look, it is a lot harder for a kid to write a book simply because of time constraints as you go through school. You will have a lot more time to write later. You will have a lot more time to read later. And I hope you find tens of thousands of absolutely fabulous books. But it is important just to write. Don't worry about the spelling. Don't worry about the punctuation. All of that comes later. Just write your stories. I wish I had tried to be a professional writer long before I did. I had to write in secret through most of my childhood and my first marriage because I was told it's a waste of time. You can never make a living being a writer in Australia. It turned out you can, which was rather lucky because I was very, very broke. But look, it was a very hard time. The marriage had broken up. I needed over was it 400 or $200 to $243 to register my car. And I had about $7.20 in the world. I had a baby. I was living in a shed in the bush, which in fact we have turned into a house. So
Oh, so
I'm
you're still in
speaking.
the same spot.
Yeah, I'm still in the shed, but it's now actually a really comfy house
Yeah.
with a
No,
really
I was thinking of your wombats. I
um,
meant to ask you about the wombats. So you've lived there?
okay, mothball. Diary Wombat's granddaughter is asleep in the hole just over there.
That's
Um,
amazing.
and her father Phil is living just under the pomegranate tree. You can just see behind me. I I knew I had to make some money. It it's very hard to make money when you're living in a shed in the bush, and you don't have money, you can't afford childcare. But a friend who is a freelance journalist who I told the secret that, oh, look, I write in secret, said, look, why don't you try selling some of it? So I did. I sent in a story to Angus and Robertson, and it ended up being shortlisted for the CBC Book of the Year, just like Tigg. It was shortlisted for the New South Wales Premier's Award, a couple of other things. Suddenly, I was making a living as a writer, and the publisher said very rashly, we would love to publish everything you write. And I don't think they realised quite how many 100 books that was going to be, and how many, and how many decades. But something changed then, because I'd been told there was no point ever having or trying to get my work published. I just wrote for myself. I wrote because it was fun. I didn't edit it. I didn't rewrite. I didn't think, how can I make this better? In the 3 weeks where I was writing for editors and for readers, I think I suddenly became a professional writer. I had to haul up all of the techniques I knew. I had to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And that didn't happen until I was in my late 20s. I really wish I had started to become a professional writer when I was 5 years old, not in my late 20s. So again, advice to anyone who wants to be a writer. Write for yourself, like the poem I wrote last night. That was just for me, not for a reader. But when you are writing a book that is going to be published, remember, this is not for you. It's wonderful fun. It will give you enormous rewards in empathy and other things you will gain. But always remember, you are doing this for the person who's going to read it. There has to be a reason why they're going to turn the page. Very few people ever think, oh, that was a gorgeous description. I'm going to turn the pages and find another gorgeous description. We turn the pages because we're enjoying it, we're escaping, and we want to know what happens next. Yeah. And we really, really care about the characters, whether we love them or hate them. So just remember, you have to give your readers a reason to keep on reading.
That's very true. It's important. And so were you an avid reader as a child?
Oh, yes, yes. And that is also where I really have to thank the CBC. I grew up in suburban Brisbane. There was one bookshop. It was a very, very long tram ride to get there. I'd learnt to read at 3. I spent my first 3.5 years with my great-grandmother, who had not been a teacher because married women were not allowed to be teachers. But she married a teacher who became a headmaster. And the unpaid job of the headmaster's wife was to teach the littlies how to read and write. So despite the fact I was dyslexic, by the time I was 3, I could read, and I loved reading, and I developed a book a day habit, and I've still got a book a day habit. So yes, I read enormously, but I'd gone through the first library, I think in about 6 weeks. We then took a tram to the next library, and it was one of the most disappointing moments of my life when I realised it had almost exactly the same books that I'd already read in the other library. Yeah. But I had my grandmothers and I had my uncle. And so from Sydney, there would be these wonderful boxes of books from their childhoods. So I read lots of glorious books written in the 1890s, the 1910s, 20s, 30s, and 40s, etc. The books my grandparents and my mother had loved. But the new books, every year when the CBC released their shortlist, Janie, J because her name was Jean, and Annie because Granny, so Janie instead of Granny. She would go out and she would buy me every single book that the CBC recommended. And this wonderful box of books would arrive. And because of that, I knew that Australia produced the most fabulous fiction and books and poetry, and I absolutely loved it. And without that CBC education, I certainly would not be the writer I am now. I had a very clear idea of who the Australian Book Council were. I got them confused with the Brisbane City Council. So I thought they all lived in this absolutely magnificent stone building, a bit like a big stone palace, with gargoyles on it and marble floors and great big mahogany seats. And the organ would start playing when they came in, and these wisest people in Australia would sit there reading every book to find the best books. And I think at heart, I'm still a 5-year-old who believes that about the CBC. So please don't disillusion me.
No, it's very special that seeing that sticker on a book and knowing a book has been shortlisted. I'm the same. I read a lot of them as growing up, and it is very special to have those books featured. And it's interesting with 80 years of CBCA going back and seeing how different books now are shortlisted and themes that you can see pop up, and going back in time almost. You can travel and read from those beautiful books back then. So it is a very special award, inspiring you. I'm sure lots of other authors, and crossing fingers for you. We'll see what happens with the awards. It's very exciting. It's an honour to be shortlisted, I'm sure. And we were hoping all the best. But thank you so much for your time today. You've been so generous. It's been an honour to interview you. I've read so many of your books. Thank you for your books. Thank you for your writing. It has changed so many of our lives, and been teaching history and reading some of those books with children. It takes them on a different journey, as if you were reading a non-fiction book about, you know what I mean, like that, looking through that perspective.
A non-fiction history will tell you what happened.
Yes.
Good historical fiction, you will be there and be part of it as it does happen. Luckily, however, you will be safe. The crocodiles won't eat you. The pirates won't throw you off the ship, and the volcano will not hurt you in any way whatsoever. It is the safest and most fun way to have adventures that I know.
It is wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, and wishing you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And
Lovely.
look, thank every reader, because without you, I would not have been able to spend so much of my life creating stories. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And from the Shadow Judges, we thank you as well. Sharing your thoughts. I'm sure it's enlightening to hear all these little bits and things as you read. You don't normally get to hear these things. So it is a very special treat for them to be able to see you and listen to your thoughts, and tied in with the shadow judging process, so that they will be thrilled to have this. So thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure.
Well, have a lovely day. And yeah, hopefully, you never know, we might cross paths again in the future. But thank you so much.
Hopefully we will. Yes.
Yes.
Look, and have a lovely rest of the CBC year as well. Where are you working now?
So I work.
Hearing for the CBC now, or what's?
So I work for Overdrive with Sora. So Sora is a digital app for schools in Australia, and so a lot of the schools do use that to access books nowadays, because it is hard sometimes, books that are out of print on the curriculum and all that kind of thing. Also, because of dyslexic font, so students can use that and enlarge the text. So with vision impairment.
Just a word about dyslexic font. I do have some expertise in that professionally. Like many dyslexics, I can't read the dyslexic font.
Right.
There is no, all independent studies have said that it is ineffective and it's got no help whatsoever. And also, it actually makes it harder for many dyslexics to read it, not easier. So it just convinces them they're more and more stupid. Here they are in the special font, and they can't even read that.
Right.
There is a lot of money in helping kids with reading difficulties. And the dyslexic font is well, put it this way, I waive my royalty rights for all books for vision impaired disabilities, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But I won't have my books translated into dyslexic font.
Interesting, because I've had some students actually say it helped. So it's, yeah,
I think that's the placebo effect.
right.
That means, oh, now you can read this. But one of my favorite stories is I was called in to help a kid who had been tutored. He was dyslexic. And the tutor said, look, he can read. He really can read. But he's too scared. He really is too scared to do it. He's so sure that he's stupid and he can't read a book. So I just asked, okay, bribery. What would it take you to actually start reading a book to your mum? And he thought for a minute, he said, dinner at Sizzlers.
Simple.
I'll give you yes, of course. And as I went out in the car park, there they were in the car. He was reading the book to his mum. And she had tears. She was smiling with tears coming down. Yes, of course he could read. He just needed the confidence. And I think that's
It's
where
not
the
phonics
placebo
then, do
comes
you
in.
think?
But
Is it more the phonics to start with, or is it like they don't understand like how the words go together or the sounds, or is it just learning to process and not reverse letters to start with? Like I don't know, like from your point of view, what is the thing that helped you the most?
um, I'm not sure that's useful because there are many, many forms of dyslexia
Yeah,
and many why people find reading
difficult.
difficult.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. One of my very young relatives is dyslexic. It runs in the family. He's having enormous problems reading. Despite, I mean, he's really working at it
Yeah.
and being. But I was given a box of biscuits for Christmas, and he is learning Japanese. And he picked up the box of biscuits and just took off the label, which was unpeeling. He said, "Grandma, these are Japanese biscuits. They've just put on a label in English." And he started to read me all of the ingredients and all of the instructions in Japanese. He has no problems with writing the ideograph script.
Mm.
It's the English words and the way they go together, which is obviously a major problem.
Yeah.
But yes, so there's no such thing as it's just. Another case of a girl who had been diagnosed as dyslexic, but once we asked questions, we realized she had been to 8 schools in 2 years because her parents were fly-in, fly-out workers. Each teacher had realized that she couldn't read, but she was probably going to be there for a few months, so they left it to the next person to teach her to read.
Oh no.
She had completely missed out.
Yeah.
So there can be many, many reasons. However, I've never found any student who can't learn to read. Anna was the daughter of a friend, severely mentally handicapped to the degree that she does need help dressing. No one had thought it was worthwhile teaching her to read because obviously she couldn't. But then someone did at 34, and she got a job and she loves it. Her job now is, and she dresses in a lovely business suit to do it, is to go to the post office, get the office's mail, go through the mail, and then she goes through the office and she delivers the mail to everyone it's addressed to. Yes, she can read. No one didn't occur to anyone
To try and
that
teach her.
we've never come across anyone. One of my very favorite stories is a 14-year-old boy. He'd been couch surfing since the age of 3, almost certainly suffering fetal alcohol syndrome.
Oh no.
By the time he was 14, he was angry, violent, could not read at all. He was lucky to be assigned a magnificent teacher. At the end of 3 months, he could read according to right up to the required standard. But he stabbed the headmaster. And I mean, stabbed him. The headmaster
Oh my
ended up in
gosh.
hospital.
Wow.
But he was a very compassionate man. He got the charges dropped. The boy was allowed to stay at school. His ambition was to work at Woolworths because of all the food. A place where there were chickens roasting and bread baking and what have you. For him, working at Woolworths was going to be paradise. That was the last time he was ever in any trouble with the police.
Wow.
He got a job at Woolworths. When I last heard of him, which was about 10 years ago, he'd become a manager. He was
Wow.
married, owned a flat. He was working with the men's shed in a program to take kids, troubled kids, and show them how to build boats and sail and fish and what have you. That was the boy that everyone had given up on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I just was curious because with this big push now with phonics, the states are rolling it out. And you wonder if that will help catch, because I've read Sally Rippon's book and her journey with her son as well, with dyslexia, and I was wondering, is it more, but it is complex and you don't know what's happening in that child's life.
Oh,
And
look, no, I'm a really strong believer in phonics because English is a really weird and difficult language.
it is.
And you need to be able to sound out words that are unfamiliar. So look, if you read enough, there are going to be a lot of words that you'll learn by sight.
Yes.
But there are always times when you're going to need to be able to sound it out. And yeah, no, it is. But every child is going to learn at different speeds.
That's
And
true as well.
yeah. Look, I also ask schools as well, just to look at their school budgets. Do you have a specialist qualified sports teacher? Oh,
Yes.
yes, of course. Do you have an oval? Yes, of course. For a wealthier school. Do you have a swimming pool? Oh, yes, we've got 3. Do you have a teacher librarian?
Yes.
Oh, no. We I think the last one we had was about 4 or 5 years ago. Do you have anyone dedicated to diagnosing and helping reading problems? Oh, no. What do you think is most important? Learning how to play sport at school or learning how to read and write?
Yes.
Oh, read and write. Okay. Compare the budgets. How much do you spend on sport? How much do you spend on literacy? How many days do kids have on excursions for sports matches and sports day, compared to days when they when they read or are shown how to find books and loved books? Look at your financial budget. Look at your time budget. And I'm certainly not saying we need to spend less on sport. Kids
No, of
sport at
course.
school is very important. But once you compare the two, we realize that, oops, we need specialist teachers for literacy as well as for sport.
Yeah, I don't understand it myself, with teacher librarians, in different states. In Australia, some states have them, a lot of them don't. There's a shift away, even with libraries in general in schools. Some of them don't have a school library. I can't understand it.
Teacher librarians are becoming an endangered species.
I know,
And
it's a real worry. But
so
then
for
they're not
so many,
purchasing as well, because there's no one in charge of that then. And then it just becomes forgotten. Or some schools are even splitting and putting them in classrooms, and then no one knows what anybody has. And it's just not the right way. That world of enjoyment when you go in and you see the library and what am I going to read, and sharing that with others and having someone to recommend a book to you, because a lot of kids don't know what they want to read, and having that, have you tried this, have you tried that, and having that guidance. It's such a shame, you know, because teacher librarians make it exciting. You know, we feature authors, we feature, you know, all different kinds of things.
And
And yeah,
all the people in the school, they know every kid
yes,
and have a pretty good idea what book is going to appeal to them.
that's
And
right.
without a teacher librarian, the kids who've got reading problems are just going to look for the shortest book possible with a cartoon on the cover and grab it and go out.
Yes.
Um, and they're not going to read the set book. They're going to ask their best friends what happens in it and pretend they've read it.
I know.
Um,
I really hope
get
it
rid of
turns around
any
again.
job in a school, but not the teacher
I know.
librarian.
I don't understand it. I really don't. I just think it's such a shame. It's social, like you for literacy, you need to read. I don't, you know, they think it's like, oh, you learn this program, you're a reader. It's not like that. You know, you have to read different kinds of books. It's training that part of your brain. I used to always say that to kids. You know, you ride a bike, you have to keep riding to improve. It's the same with reading. And without that, having that there to support that, how will they improve? Because you keep hearing literacy levels are dropping and you wonder why don't they put the two together, you know? It's frustrating. It's really frustrating, but hopefully eventually someone will. I mean, New South Wales is better, I think, in terms of teacher librarians. They are funded, though I do hear changes happening, so I'm really hoping that doesn't continue. Other states it's
Look,
mixed, but
it breaks my heart when a politician will arrive and promise, if elected, I'll give you a new swimming pool.
I
And I
know.
have never heard politicians say, if I'm elected, well, actually, the Rudd government did give a choice of a hall or a library. But one of
Yeah.
the tragedies was that while the libraries were being built, they usually got rid of all of the books.
Yes.
And you'd go to the school, and here was this absolutely lovely library, and they couldn't afford to buy the
The
books.
books. Yeah,
Um,
that's right. And then sometimes I find they can afford the books, but there's no one in the position to do that. And
mm,
that's just
mm.
crazy as well, you know, kind of have it both together. But
It,
yeah,
it's also buying policies, as I've explained by many people who own bookshops, that they used to every month or couple of months, they go to the school and they would discuss all of the new releases with the teacher librarian,
yep,
and then the school would put the order. And then they had done it for 3 or 4 months and realized that they weren't getting the order. And why? And they said, we're buying them from Aldi or whatever, it's cheaper. And they said, but we come to you to give you advice in return for
yeah.
you buying books. And the school was absolutely disgusted with them because they stopped giving them a day a month to discuss all of the new books and what was in them, etc.
That's a two-way
Um,
street.
but it was a two-way street. And now, of course, that school has no information about the new books or who it would appeal to or anything like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's really short-sighted.
mm,
Yeah, bookshops are
anyway,
vital.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
thank you
Keep
so much.
looking at
Say
it.
hello to your wombats for me.
I
I see
will.
them sometimes on your posts. They're adorable. Thank you so much and have a lovely day.
It's you too. Yes,
Thank
too.
you.
And thank you so
Okay.
much. Okay, bye-bye.